Hello, everybody. Hi. My name is Yumi Stynes. Welcome to my sermon on the fear. As I'm first on this Thursday morning for Dark Mofo, I want to really sincerely thank you for turning up because, for starters, at 9:30 on a Thursday morning, fear is a pretty heavy topic. It'd be fair to say that most of us spend a good proportion of our lives trying to turn down the volume on our fears to avoid that which we fear and avoid even thinking about those terrible lurking fears that we all carry, but not today. So please get yourselves uncomfortable and really confront this idea. What are you afraid of? It's actually a pretty grim question, and I do want to put it to you to ask yourself, what are you afraid of? Because this question is going to go deep to the heart of who you are. It's a question that prods at your most vulnerable spot. It pokes a rusty nail into your wound, a dirty finger into your blind eye. It digs a stick into your infection, your scar, your hurt. And there is no right answer. In this room, I'm sure everybody would have a different thought on what their greatest fear is. But before we go deep, let's talk top line. So a top-line fear is probably the first few answers that you thought of when you asked yourselves, what are you afraid of? Spiders, for instance. They're really easy and crawly and they're right to be feared. And heights? Yes. Or snakes. And don't get me wrong, people who are afraid of these top-line things are sometimes really, really afraid, like fully afraid. I know someone who he's a TV director, and if he sees footage of a snake on one of his monitors, he literally can't sleep that night. I used to get vertigo when I was drinking, which I'll get back to in a sec, but fear of heights is very real and a very common fear, which I also think sits on that top line of fears. So a top line fear is maybe something that you could talk about at dinner, unless your top line fear was public speaking, in which case you're probably not piping up at dinner. But at dinner or getting coffee with friends or coming to a talk on a Thursday morning, you can only share so much. Your friends don't want to get filthy handling your darkest fears. They only want top-line stuff where you're going to scare them, and much as they love you, they don't necessarily want to be standing next to you while you peer into the abyss. For research purposes, I asked people on Twitter what their fears are, and this is how I worded the tweet. For Dark Mofo, I'm talking about fear. Can I ask a serious question? What's your greatest fear? Be bold. I really want to know. Dig in. Not your second greatest fear, I already know what that is. What's your really big one? People responded in great numbers. The answers were so vivid and so scary that I'm going to use them to get my talk started today. I'm also going to tell you about some other fears that probably should have been listed, but weren't. One that a couple of people caught, but nearly everyone else missed, and another that was so thoroughly forgotten that not one single person mentioned it. And today I'm going to tell you why I think those fears were missed or ignored or deliberately omitted. This Twitter thread, to get back to that, it was dark. But there were some really excellent top-line answers there. A fear, for instance, that Tony Abbott will make a comeback. It's top-line, right? It's great dinner table chat. Or that Australia will follow America into another war, as with Bush in Iraq, said Lel. Katie Hall said her fear is waking up and realising that I've sleepwalked outside with no pants on. I've been having variations of this same nightmare since I was 7 years old, and it's basically turned me into a never nude. Thanks, Katie. That's awesome. It's hilarious and real and funny. A little theme emerged, which I didn't predict, of people, men and women, who are afraid to cross bridges. Not metaphoric bridges, actual bridges. Sometimes it's any bridge, sometimes it's specific bridges. Samuel Walker messaged me, I can't walk across a bridge in London. And from Susan Robertson, her fear is driving over bridges. I hate the fuckers, especially the Mooney Bridge. Yeah, that one. Haven't driven over it for decades, she says. When I used to drive hungover, I would get vertigo driving over bridges, kind of all bridges, but I would get especially diabolical vertigo going over the Anzac Bridge in Sydney. I can laugh about it now, but it was crook, driving while feeling like you're falling. The most common fear that people shared with me was the fear of their kids dying before them, outliving your own kids. Nellie Thomas wrote, "One of my kids dying, I can barely write it. I think I would cease to exist." Dozens of people wrote to share that same fear of their kids dying. And I guess that you probably wouldn't bring that up at a dinner party, so now we're really digging in. We're getting uncomfortable. Loved ones in general dying is a very real fear. Suicide comes up a number of times, friends doing it, children, or being unable to risk the temptation yourself. Super heavy. Many people mentioned their own siblings being hurt or dying. And there were a few tweets people sent me that were so specific, there seemed within just a few words an enormous subtext of pain and fear. From Brett Martin, this is his fear, that it will turn out that I am the kind of guy that I despise, that I work so hard not to be, but that I have family members who are. I've been him before, I don't ever want to be again. Dr. Stephen Roberts messaged me, his great fear is breaking a clavicle and seeing it protrude through my neck skin. So specific. Lauren Forbes said that my brother will never want to get help for his gambling addiction. Tracy Sorensen, my mother losing her marbles and not knowing who I am. I suppose my fear is that if she doesn't know me, I won't know me either. Chrissy Neen says, surviving my partner is my biggest fear, and in doing so, reverting to my true, untethered self. Something I can tell is driving Alice Ryan crazy. Someone kidnapping my daughter and not taking insulin with them. It drives me crazy thinking about, she writes. There were a lot of people whose fears centred around the climate crisis and its attendant end-of-the-world scenarios. Loneliness, insanity, pissing away their lives making pastry and julienning vegetables. Failure. And here's one that came up a lot, and I want to put this to you and think about it. Living life too timidly. Came up really often. Dying in poverty, and of course just dying, back to that. Said Anna Spargo Ryan, dying. My dad dying, me dying because my dad dies, my kids dying, I guess basically anybody dying. That's her fear. And Ms. Stevenson said, do you think most mums are desperately hoping they don't die before their kids get to 18, or is it just me? Samuel Leighton Dorr made me laugh a bit with this one. I've never been scared of dying myself. I'm already a bit tired, he says. But the thought of my parents dying or having a debilitating stroke like my grandma did fills me with dread. Okay, so like I said, we've got top line fears and we've got bottom line fears, but here's where we get to a couple of major things that I think are missing. Any ideas what's missing? Anyone want to shout something out? I host a podcast. It's called Ladies, We Need to Talk. And I think one of the reasons the podcast has been so popular is because we talk directly to a fear, and that fear is the fear women have of our own bodies. We fear being disgusting, we fear being fat, and no one talked about that. We fear leaky vaginas, we fear smelly private parts, we fear the hair that we grow that people might see and that might be used to shame us. We fear prolapse, abortion, childbirth, pregnancy, cancer, miscarriage, menopause, discharge, menstrual blood. We are taught that our bodies are at the centre of some of the most disgusting things that a person can be, and that containing this, keeping it all nice, is a primary duty of ours if we are to continue to live in a civilised culture. And our fears don't centre on some outlying freak element of this body. It centres on really regular, normal stuff, like having a vulva. But this is such a bad thing that we almost never ever refer to it by its real name. We keep misnaming our vulvas vaginas because why? Because if we say the word vulva clearly enough, it might evoke an image of what? Like an actual vulva? Oh my God. And I know you know this, but let me say it aloud anyway, because I also know that were I to hitch up my skirt and reveal my underwear, or if I was just walking around in swimmers or whatever, and from here to here, you could see pubic hair. I don't care how woke you are, this would be noteworthy, okay? I'm not saying you wouldn't like it or even love it, but it would be unusual enough for you to clock it, and you can be quite sure that if there were 2 or more people in the room, at least one of them would find it, and therefore me, disgusting. And if a tabloid photographer were in this room and they shot this rogue pubic thatch, this would be a good opportunity to shame me, to question my sanity, make fun of me, because how dare I show hair where hair grows? We fear our own hair, or we fear being shamed because of it. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find an adult woman who hasn't nursed a fear of leaking menstrual blood onto her clothes or her chair in public. It is actually one of the worst things imaginable, except that it isn't. I researched this stuff. And it happens. Blood leaks out of women all the time. Once in a while, it's bound to get on someone's clothes or someone's chair or bed, and guess what? No one dies from it. And yet, so much fear circulates around this idea. And no one mentioned that on Twitter. A woman's ability to marshal all this womanly stuff and keep it neat and keep it tucked away is considered to be direct proof of her mental stability. And I think women, we fear being busted. I mean, what would happen if we all just stopped caring? Did anyone here see the footage of the girl who ran the London Marathon while she was on her period? She didn't use anything, like no pad, no tampon, no cup. She just did a free bleed. It was about 4 years ago. Her name was Kieran Gandhi, and she did something revolutionary. I suggest you look her up. You can see photos of her running toward a very common fear that women have, and she's smiling. So when I was asking people about fear, why didn't women's bodies come up at all? Why didn't any of this body stuff, the goo, the hair, the discharge, get a mention? I mean, seriously, hundreds of thousands of people download the podcast, and I know women fear this stuff. So I have some suspicions. What I suspect is that while our top-line fears like sharks and sinkholes, and bottom-line fears like locked-in syndrome, falling off my sobriety, or one from Xavier O'Shaughnessy, who writes, "I'm terrified that deep down I'm a monstrously bad person," those fears have a certain glamour. The fears we have around our bodies are so mundane, so everyday, that we wear that fear just like we wear our daily deodorant, unthinkingly and dutifully. We fear being judged, for instance, for having fat thighs, and this fear is enough to motivate some of us to exercise and measure what we eat and second-guess how we dress. And I know this does not apply to everyone in the room, but I'm sure many can relate. The amount of time we waste thinking about what we eat because we don't want to be fat, or maybe we don't actually care much about whether or not we're fat, but we just want our body to look like most bodies and blend in and not be different and not attract attention, and so for that reason, we would rather not be fat. Fearing what we look like or what we could look like, this fear is so common and so mundane that we wear it like skin. The other fear I wanted to get to was actually mentioned on Twitter when I put that call out. 2 people mentioned it. They were both women. Says Nat, "I'm deadly afraid that my daughter will be raped or murdered in a world where the statistics are against her." And says Joe's Edge, her fear, "Someone driving up my driveway to rape me." Last year, I fronted a documentary on SBS called "Is Australia Sexist?" And if you didn't see the doco, guess what the answer is? One of the things we talked about in the documentary was catcalling. It's when people shout at you on the streets. And what this means to the people doing it, and what it means to the people on the receiving end. And I think there was a moment of clarity that we achieved in the documentary, that moment when the light bulb came on. We were interviewing a girl called Tyler about how she feels when she gets catcalled on the street, and she said, "I don't like it. It makes me feel unsafe." They're basically saying when they do that, that there's a possibility of rape. And I was like, yes. She said what I've always thought. When you get catcalled, they're saying they consider you rapeable. They're not saying, "I'm going to rape you," but in the message of that catcall, the men are saying that their unsolicited attention may have unsolicited physical follow-through. Because you never know, do you? You just actually never know. The catcall is an impolite reminder that that guy considers you fuckable. Now, the one that tries to rape you is probably not the same one that catcalls you, but there's a queue of them. Never quite knowing is why women have this fear that is quiet and slow burning and so present in almost every waking hour of our lives that we don't even bother to mention it. It's vigilance, it's constant, and it's tiring. And we don't even want to say it. Can anybody hear that that's coming through my monitor?
You can really get them there, Claire.
Yeah, you can hear that. Can I just tell the soundy that the second mic is on and it's feeding out through here? It's very, very distracting. A lot of us don't even want to say the word rape because, like vulva, it evokes it. I fear rape just like I fear drinking again. I don't want either to happen to me. To finish, I want to read you a Facebook post from a woman called Lauren Dimov. She posted it about a week ago. It's called "Weekends for a Single 19-Year-Old Female in Melbourne." Gig tonight in Carlton, I really want to go. None of my friends can come, they're busy. Decide to ignore the fact that women are most targeted when they're on their own and that Carlton is a dangerous area, especially for females at night time, because I'm sick of not being able to do things that I should be able to do as a person in a free country. Go to the gig by myself, buy myself a drink. Watch super carefully that nobody spiked it, even the bartender. Guy comes up to me, starts hitting on me. I'm nervous, but I try to be polite. On the inside, I'm hyper aware of how dangerously this situation could turn out. He asks my name. I tell him, "Lauren." Shit, I forgot to lie. I lie about where I go to university though and where I hang out. He offers to buy me a drink because I've finished mine. I say no, but he does anyway. I pretend to drink it. Gig starts and I weasel out from his grip. My friends up the front gotta go. Start dancing, let my guard down a bit. Start enjoying what I came here for. It's a nice time. Dude comes up behind me, grabs my waist and starts dry humping me. I panic, shoot him a death stare and move to the other side of the stage. Better not to aggravate him too much then, God knows what he could do. I want to buy another drink and get wasted, but I'm scared to put myself in an even more vulnerable position. Make friends in the mosh, he seems nice enough. Doesn't look like he has bad intentions, just wants to dance with me. Then he puts his hand on the inside of my thigh. This hand, it burns like ice. Awkwardly laugh and go to the bathrooms, lock myself in a cubicle, decide I've had enough and I'm gonna go home. Don't have much money, public transport would be ideal. However, what if any of those guys followed me to the tram stop and tried to go home with me or kidnap me? What would I do? Decide to call Uber. It's $30 peak surcharge, nice. Get in the Uber, sigh of relief, off to the safe parameters of my room. Uber starts talking to me. "Where you from, girl?" Politely chat to pass time. "A good-looking lady like yourself, any boy would go crazy for you. Do you have a boyfriend?" I'm shocked, I'm silent. "The place you're going to tonight, are you going to be there alone?" he asks. Holding back tears, I blurt out, "No, my entire family is there, including my 2 bodybuilder brothers and massive pit bulls, thanks for the ride, bye." I walk to the neighbour's house instead and wait there until he leaves. It takes a while, I'm crying. I open the door, nobody greets me because I'm home alone, just my guard cat and I. I struggle to fall asleep, decide to never go to a gig alone again. Just on that, the comments from men were all, "You should learn martial arts." Thanks for listening. My name's Yumi Stynes. I really appreciate you turning up this morning. I'll be signing books, taking photos in the lobby for the next half hour. Thank you.